Hello, everybody. It's Mr. Drood here, and I'm coming at you with Chapter 1, Section 2, Additional Notes, the Forms of Government. I have already made a video uh, the other day for Section 2 outline, so if you are looking for that, please look for that video. But this will be covering Section 2 additional notes. Now, Section 2 additional notes is a lot of review because I know I went through into great detail with the outline of how a lot of this is. This is a lot of review. So we're going to go right into it. So through the three ways governments are classified, we've discussed this. So the first way is who can participate in the governing process. So if you remember what we talked about in the outline, we talked about who could participate. We were talking about the democracies, the different types of dictatorships, and we discussed how they can participate. So that is the first way a government is classified, is through who can participate, and specifically talking about the people. The second one is the geographic distribution of governmental power within the states. If we remember, there was three main types of power distribution: unitary government, where all the power was within the hands of one single central group. There is confederate, where all the power is within the local governments and the central governments have very little power. And then there's federal governments. Federal governments meet in the middle. They share power between the central governments and the local governments. Again, I covered that in great detail in my previous videos talking about our outline. So if you are more confused on that, please take a look at that video, and I go into great detail both with the outline itself and our nice little visual Mrs. Lucas provided for us. The last part of the classification of our government is the relationship between the legislative, the lawmaking branch, and the executive, the law executing or law carrying out branch. So that is just talking about how they are relating to each other. We talked about that there was presidential, where they are separate and they are elected by the people. And then we talked about parliamentary, where both the legislative and the executive are together and they're one. They are one and the other they are linked. And that is a parliamentary system. The next section right here is just a bunch of examples of all these terms that we covered in our outline. So the first one is an indirect democracy or a representative democracy. The perfect example of that would be the US. The United States is a representative democracy, and we elect our leaders. We make sure that they are following the will of the people. That's why it's a democracy. It follows the will of the people. And the US is one of the best examples for that. If you guys have a different example, that's fine, but the USA is probably one of the best examples you can get. Autocracy, if you remember, that's a dictatorship ruled by one person. A perfect example of that would be North Korea. Now, I am not going to try to spell his name since I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it is Kim Jong-un is the leader of North Korea, and he is a perfect example of a autocracy. 4, we have unitary government, and unitary government, it just means that the power is centralized. That means the local governments really don't have a lot of say, but it doesn't mean that the people don't have a say. Because look here, the UK is an excellent example of a unitary government. A unitary government, all the power is centralized, and that means they make all the decisions. However, they could still ask the people because the UK is still a democracy. They still are free. And actually, if you guys want a better example that comes closer to home, Sterling Heights High School also be an example of a unitary government. If you think about it, Mr. Miller could be our leader. He's our principal. And he, even though all the power comes from our the admin and the school board, they still, even though all of our power comes from them and us, the people, let's say the classrooms were the individual local governments, the teachers and the students still have to listen to the principal and listen to the government, but they still ask us for our opinion and they want to help us as much as they can. A perfect example is Mr. Miller asked your families if you wanted to go back into the building for due to COVID. Some of you guys said you wanted to go back into the building, and you guys are starting the 22nd. But some of you said we want to stay online, and that's also okay. And he accommodated the school district, not just Mr. Miller, but the school district accommodated that. So another Sterling Heights High School, if we were a government, we would be a unitary government. So that would be the best classification for if we were Sterling Heights High School. A federal government, a good example of that is the United States. So where the power is shared. So the USA, Canada, Mexico, these are great examples of federal government. Now, a confederate government could be the European Union or EU. If you guys don't know what the EU is, the European Union is a bunch of different countries like Europe, the Netherlands, Italy, France, and they come together and they created a central government called the European Union, and they work together economically. They help each other socially, politically, and they have a central government called the United European Union. If I can get my words out, European Union. But the individual countries like France, Germany, Switzerland, they still have a lot of power. And they actually tell the European Union what they want and what they do not want. If, let's say, Germany says, no, we don't like that, and France says, we don't like that, guess what? The European Union cannot go forward without their permission. So that's a good example of a modern day confederacy. Remember, confederacy is when the local governments control the central government because they have all the power. The individual local governments, in a in the case of the EU, Germany or France would be a good example. The United States also used to be a confederacy back under the Articles of if I can highlight it, Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was our first attempt at a government. That was before the Constitution, and we'll learn a bit more about that in chapter 2, but that was what we started off with. The next one is the presidential government, and this is where we elect to our executive and our legislative separately. So we have an executive that is the president, and we have a legislative, which is the Congress, and they're separate. They are not connected. And the USA does that. We do not have a parliamentary system, which where the executive and the legislative are together. In the UK, Australia, Canada, Israel, and a lot of other countries are parliamentary. Parliament or a parliamentary government is super popular. It's probably one of the most popular forms of government out there. So those are examples that you can have, and it's good to have for you to study from. Now, this next portion is for those that wanted additional help, and this part is trying to say in these situations, what would each of these types of governments do? A democracy and a dictatorship. Now, what I have written here is one example. You could have something different, and as long as it's similar and has the same idea, it's perfectly fine. So if there was a drought that caused massive food shortages in a democracy, the government would help the people in any way they could. They would provide money, support, aid to the people as much as they could. And they were entrusted by the people to do that. People would say, government, we want your help. We need your help. And the government would go and help them because that is what a democracy is. The government is ruled by the people. And if the people say, we need your help, government, the government will come in and help. In a dictatorship, that's not the case. If the government themselves would choose who they helped, the people wouldn't have a say because they don't care or support the people. They only care about themselves. Usually, in a dictatorship, in this type of a situation, they would help the rich and the powerful and the people that would help the leaders. So that's super important to know the difference between how they would deal with this situation. Now, what if there was a program for recycling and alternative energy they wanted to put in place? In a democracy, they would either ask the people through a vote what they wanted to do. Hey, do you guys want this program? Do you not want this program? That they would ask. Or they would say, we want to do this, so we're going to give you an incentive. We're going to give you money. We're going to give you a tax break. We're going to give you new roads. They would promise something to get this program in place. So they would still get permission from the people in any way they can. In a dictatorship, that's not the case. They would just force the citizens to comply. They would just make the citizens do whatever they wanted. If they wanted the program, they would say, you're doing this program no matter what, even if it makes you poor. We don't care. Or they say, we're not doing it. That's our choice. You have no choice in the matter, even if they wanted it. Now, the last one, your government wants a constitutional amendment to limit the terms of leaders. Well, in a democracy, it would just go to a straight vote. Do the people, hey, people, do you want there to be term limits on your leaders? Or we would have in the United States, we'll talk about this in future chapters, a constitutional convention to make the law or amendment, I should say, legal. And so but they're still asking the people what they want. And again, if you can't tell the theme that's going on here, a dictatorship would either just make it happen or not make it happen. Again, they don't care about the people. They do it themselves. Whatever they want, that's what will happen. If they wanted this type of a law in place, they would make it. If they're like, we want to stay in power. We don't want to limit our power. Well, again, that's what they would do. So again, if you have different examples than what I have, that's okay. Just make sure that the same similar ideas are down. Know the difference between a democracy and a dictatorship. So that's it for our additional notes section 2. So if you need any additional help, again, please come to my office hours and please message me in Schoology. Thank you and have a wonderful day.